And so it's not the AI that's going to go and compete with your management contract, but it's going to be the people that are using AI. They're going to go and say, hey, I can do it for 10% and still make a lot of money.
It is my great pleasure to welcome Sam Dundas to the show. Sam, thanks for joining us today. Please describe Besty actually for the audience and the use case for property managers like myself.
There's a finite number of things that guests ask for on a consistent basis that like a chatbot can reliably respond with. And then we do guest messaging, and then we've built out basically a lot of these best practices that we've learned from bigger operators on how they try to squeeze more revenue out of each booking.
Right, so free up your time so we can provide better service to the guests or fix more complex problems. What do you think the biggest risk to us as investors, right, as short-term rental investors with this technology?
This kind of a double-edged sword, but I think that it's going to force compression on management fees. I think that it's only going to be because of tools like to rely on things that are running on autopilot to make you that extra income, to make it worthwhile. And it's hard to get that right now without incurring additional costs through people. So,
welcome back to STR Like the Best. I'm your host, Michael Chang. It is my great pleasure to welcome Sam Dundas to the show. Sam, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited about this episode. Very topical, what we're going to talk about, AI. AI is the buzzword for the last 12, 24 months. Everything is AI. With the NVIDIA stock like ripping and, it being such a big force in software, enterprise software. So really excited to have this conversation. And thanks for joining. And you're going to be our first AI guest on the show.
Awesome. Hopefully I won't let you down. I'll do my best.
Well, I've used your product now for 2 months, so we won't be let down. I'm very impressed with what you're doing at Besty AI. But why don't I give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, you bet. So I'm Sam. I'm the co-founder of Besty. Prior to this, I was actually a property manager and owner. So back in 2020, like most people, with a bunch of time on my hands, I figured it'd be cool to buy our first investment property. So we bought a 800 square foot, 2-bedroom apartment in a city in Calgary, in Canada, where I'm originally from, in Calgary. And that went really well. So we got creative and found a way to buy a second one in that same building, both all on Airbnb and short-term rentals. And then that sort of got me into managing properties for other people. So a few other people nearby, because, when you have the density of a certain like cleaners and operations, it's like, that incremental few units is like worth it, as what I found. So started managing properties for another person. And then that snowballed into running a portfolio of 35 units. And then we also did an arbitrage, like with a fourplex nearby as well. So owning, managing, and then doing some like rental arbitrage over the last few years prior to getting into the software space.
That's awesome. So you the holy trinity of short-term rental investing. Let's stay there for a moment. The co-hosting, ownership, and arbitrage. You kind of went. Usually people go co-hosts or managing, arbitrage, and owner, and you kind of went a different path. Out of the 35, how many are you currently operating now, or is that kind of in the rearview mirror?
Yeah, so I did it all myself for the most part of the last 3 years, and then as things started kind of taking off with Besty, I brought in a really good friend and partner who sort of takes care of the majority of the day-to-day operations, and then I still have my HostAway account hooked up to it. It was like when we test new features, and I'm still like very involved in operations because it lends its hand well to the software side, but. It's like 95% of my effort now is on the software stuff. That sort of transitioned into being my full-time effort and where my attention lies kind of gradually
Beautiful.
over the last year.
So out of the 3 strategies, what do you think is the best way for someone with a full-time job? So someone listening to this right now has a full-time job, wants to invest in short-term rentals. What do you think is like an ideal strategy to get started with?
Yeah, I mean, I personally think that owning as small of a property as you can, whether that's within a multifamily building, is just like, if you're going to go to the effort of like setting up all these softwares and like learning about all the effort that goes into it. Like when I think of all the work that went into running these arbitrage units, just to pay someone else's lease and to make like some margin, and then all the CapEx and all the setup, like it was just as much work to do it as like an owner, and at least we're like covering a mortgage, building equity. And when you look at the actual investment of like, furnishing a fourplex versus buying like a small one bedroom, let's say, even in like a tier 2 or tier 3 market, like I think like you're just at least buying into something that's like longer term. So I would go ownership first if it's possible, even if it's not like, like a total like gem of a property. It's like, that's where I would start before considering arbitrage or managing for other people for that matter.
Interesting. So it's really more of an ROI on time, right? Because I agree with you. It's a real learning curve to get everything set up, and not just get it once you get it set up, but also being good at it and how to operate it. And it sounds like just as a longer tail, when you own something, it's going to be hopefully years and decades. Arbitrage is shorter term. I think that's a great way to think about how to start. Like, to start small, build equity, and go from there. I went a slightly different way. We went arbitrage first, to kind of test out and see if we knew what we were doing. This is 2016 too, so kind of different time and place.
Right. For sure.
But I do think that there definitely is a great place for a lot of people, a great place to start is ownership, right? If you have the cash flow, you have the liquidity, the cash flow from the job, the liquidity for a down payment, and then the financeability of a job as well. It's a great way to start this process. So cool. And that's pretty awesome that you have and that's what I really liked about your background was like you were a short-term rental operator first before, and then, went to the software side. You were solving probably a problem for yourself. And maybe talk about it a little bit. Like, what was the catalyst to start Besty?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I was able to get more of a background like in it, but like when people say that, like, oh, it's nice to work with like a software vendor that actually has the experience, but it was like I didn't have that much experience, but I like at least got to fit a lot of, like I talked to most people, a lot of our customers have been in the space, like even you, like been in the space for decades. I didn't have like industry expertise for decades. And for me, it was like I got a taste of over a very condensed period of time, a lot of different like growing pains and like a lot of those decisions that you make. But for me, it was just over a course of a 2-year period. So by no means am I an expert on the operating side, but I definitely saw just like first, like the ease of like implementing software tools. So when we first upgraded, we were like Besty for hosts and that, like moving into a PMS basically, which was like for me, even at 1 or 2 properties was such a great investment of just like managing across different OTAs, like whether it's Besty for hosts or like Logify or Hostfully or some of these, lower cost, easier, like lower barriers to entry PMSs. I just found that was like operationally, automated messages, like calendar, the sync and listing syndication. Like that was just like the biggest weight off my shoulders. And then, you get kind of clever and understand when you start connecting third-party apps and what they do, like Price Labs, being that first really big unlock and just being like, okay, wow, these softwares are really intuitive and easy to use. And then, my background prior to that, my full-time job was in software, working for these 2 founders, and I always wanted to start a tech company. And so when we saw those 2 things, I had started. It's kind of a long story, but I started a company with a guy here in New York City. That's how I came here, and we worked on that for about 2 years together. And then it wasn't really going anywhere, so we just made a tough decision. Actually, a year ago, this Friday was the time we made the decision to like pivot the business and start Besty. So anyway, so it was a mix of working in software, starting a different company with a guy, doing this, Airbnb stuff on the side through COVID, and then it all sort of came together to start Besty.
So what was that? So like so you have these 35 properties. You're on a PMS system. You're starting to connect all the different vertical software tools to be able to run your business, right? And then I guess when did you make the jump to getting a VA?
Yeah. So that was after. So the order of operations was basically these 2 properties in Calgary, and then these 4 units on the arbitrage around the same time as this 1 unit that was managed. So we had the 7. That's when I was like, I felt like between 5 to 7, like I felt pretty comfortable. It was definitely a lot of work, but between automated messages and like, keeping my eye on the calendars and maybe doing some last minute changes, like I had that pretty much under control. But then one of the owners I was managing for had this like big portfolio, like the bulk of the 35 units were in Germany. And so with the time change and the language change and like all of that stuff, it just became instantly like undoable myself. So it was kind of like overnight, we turned on all these listings and right away I was like, okay, I can't do this. So that's when I just scoured Upwork and interviewed a few people and found like what was like reasonable rates wise, and then compared that against what other people were paying. And that's when I made the jump to just doing everything 24/7 for communications.
Yeah. No, having a VA is, I think, actually the biggest unlock in industry. And for folks listening, software definitely super important. Table stakes, to be fair, though. Like you need to have some sort of PMS system, a lower tier. Hospitable is one that I don't personally use, but I've heard it's very lightweight, just like a lightweight one. Like a Hostaway and Guesty, the full version and Guesty are pretty fulsome integrations, and they take a lot of time. And it's really not necessary if you're under 10, 15, I would say 10 at least. You can get by with a pretty simple PMS that just connects you with a different OTAs like Booking.com, VRBO, Expedia, etc., and then has the automated messages and allows you to connect some third-party apps to make your life a little easier. But the real unlock, I think, is the AI. Sorry, is the VA. I'm mixing my two-letter acronyms, but the VAs, the virtual assistants, whether it's from Asia or Latin America, you're buying back your time for a couple $100s a month, and that's for us. We have 7 virtual. I don't even like the term virtual assistants. We have 7 team members that work with us on the business for our 35 listings. So how many VAs did you have? So we were on the same listing count. How many VAs did you have, or do you have currently?
Yeah, we were paying actually like a team. We were at a cost per listing for 24/7.
Oh, okay.
So we were paying, and it was only I think because we were at around in the 30s that they did it, but we were paying $100 a month per listing for 24/7 support, and that was all guest
Oh, wow.
communications. Yeah,
That's
so
expensive. Sam, it's expensive.
yeah, yeah. So I found out, but very expensive. Yeah, but I mean that
Very
was pretty much.
expensive.
Yeah, I mean that was pretty much people who were like already on board and then the host away. We were doing a lot like it was very like operationally intensive, like working in Germany, some of these like fishing towns where people had to call and there's all this like tourism stuff you had to do and fill out
Uh,
forms and yeah, but that's pretty much completely hands off as far as like benchmarking. If you're like an owner to be completely off the hook 24/7, that's the cost of piece for me. So for $100 a month, I was like, we're making probably 500 or 600 a month listing on management fees. So 80% of the cost for 99% less work. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. That's a great. I mean, that's a great ROI. That's a great ROI. I guess we've always kind of in-sourced from the beginning, so that's just the way that we've done it. But I don't want to give away our cost structure. I don't think we're that far. I don't think we're that far off. Kathy, who's been with me the earliest, she's been with me since 2018, and then 2 other team members since 2019. So we've had them for a very long time, and they lived through COVID with us. So they're like family to us. They're like they were loyal to us during like some tough times. So now that things are better, we definitely want to reward them and keep them on. But it brings me up to the AI part. They're like, I'm not the road tester for Bestie. The team is, and we've now been actually. I should pause here. Please describe Bestie actually for the audience and the tool and the use case for property managers like myself.
Yeah, yeah. So it's what you expect, sort of, with all the ubiquitous talk around like ChatGPT and all these really cool AI models. Like we basically just done what you would have expected as far as like how do I get AI to help me manage my properties, and so that starts with sort of guest communication, trying to build like a robust and reliable chatbot that just responds to all your guests for you. And so like practically what that looks like is there's a finite number of things that guests ask for on a consistent basis that like a chatbot can reliably respond with. Like they ignore the check-in instructions and they're at the front door and they're asking for the lockbox code, or they don't feel like clicking through the UI on Airbnb for the net, the Wi-Fi, or little things like that. Like what? So we've built out a system that plugs into these PMSs. So a handful of these PMSs, but soon you won't need to use a PMS at all. You'll be able to connect your Airbnb account directly to us, which will be a big unlock for for people. That's been like kind of a bummer with some of these softwares that are coming out. Is that, oh, here's this caveat: you need to pay for this expensive PMS.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so
Well,
connect your
those they get and they gatekeep you too, by the way, too.
yeah, exactly. So anyway, so you connect your whole operation so that right now that's via PMS, and then we do guest messaging, and then we've built out basically a lot of these kind of best practices that we've learned from bigger operators on how they try to squeeze more revenue out of each booking. So selling early check-in, upselling, filling up gap nights. So looking through your calendar every day and finding gaps that we can send out offers to try to get higher occupancy, sending messages to previous guests who have stayed with you saying, hey, if you guys want to return for a discount, we see the units available again. It looks like you had a good experience. So, et cetera. A few other things, following up with inquiries for you. So a lot of like just best practices that we can productize, things that I've done myself manually or instructed our team to do. And then, looking beyond that, there's going to be a whole lot more like within the scope of what AI is capable of. But we just wanted to start with something simple and reliable. And then, from your experience, you've been running sort of that draft mode, approving the responses before they go out and inquiries, responding to inquiries automatically on autopilot. But anyway, that's kind of what Besty is today.
Yeah, no, that's that's a great way to introduce the product. I think the PMS, I would call it kind of like version one, like the automated messaging, and Airbnb has it as well, right? Like the triggers are very defined and flexible. One day before checkout, send this message. One day, 3 days after checkout, send this message. Right? There's no context to it besides just time and when the person made a reservation, checked in, checked out. Right? I think what the LLM, the AI does is just make it like a smarter response. And it's for our team, it's made, I think, one, probably a little more conservative than maybe others. So we haven't probably, unlocked the full treasure chest of the capabilities of the product. But what we've discovered, and Sam and I, we actually, this hasn't been pre-wired. The last time we talked, I was in Austin maybe 2 weeks ago, and the team's been still working on it. So I got their feedback before our conversation here today. And the biggest thing that they like is, I think, well, first off, one is it makes them nervous. They first the VAs are like, are they, is this going to take my job? That's the first question I
Right.
got. And I assured them, I was like, look, I mean, this isn't about taking your job, right? Like, this is a tool to free up your time, so you're not responding to like really simple messages that a smart bot could do, right? So free up your time so we can provide better service to the guests or fix more complex problems. So it took like a week actually to like get them on board. They're like, okay, got it. And then and now they've been using it for about 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks maybe. The biggest thing they told me was it's great because it saves a ton of time, because I don't have to start kind of a message like from a blank sheet of paper or copy paste a prior response or look for a prior response where they have to kind of make changes. The AI will just kind of prompt something cool that they can use, and like they'll like have to massage around the edges sometimes, but that's a big unlock for them to save time. And the ability to, we haven't fully implemented this, but the ability to upsell days that aren't being used, right? We were doing it in a way that wasn't maximizing revenue. I think your method is much more on percentage of the rate versus just a fixed price. I think that's going to provide a lot of upside for us. And lastly, it's 24/7 coverage. Like, we don't have, even 7 years later, we actually don't have 24/7 coverage. Luckily, we've only had kind of like one bad incident, between the hours of midnight and 8 a.m., where we didn't need to. But, inquiries weren't being answered. If they were, came at 2 a.m., they would get answered 6 hours later. So we were losing a lot of those. And basically having Besty as our chat agent from 12 to 8, right? I think that will be a really, instead of me hiring to hire someone to do that, and I think it'd be kind of a waste of money, and because the person would just sit there. I think that would be a really great. So those are kind of things that we're working on implementing the platform. So really happy so far. I think there's more that we can do with it. We're just being a little more
Yeah,
conservative.
conservative.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I don't want
Yeah.
to. I don't want to mess it up too, right? Like I don't want to. The one thing about the AI is it's one of my team told me, they're like, it's too nice. It's so nice.
Right.
It's so nice. I know you program that way, but it's like, yeah, sometimes like I don't want to be that. We don't want to. Sometimes the guests are trying to, candidly extort us for like a refund for some minor issue, and like we actually
Right.
don't want to be that nice. And it's like the AI says yes to everything, or like, oh, we actually don't want to say yes to it. No, I'll pause there, but
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah. No, no,
feedback.
it's all fair stuff. I've heard of many, many times. So like, I think the first part is that to your point, like there is nobody yet. And I don't think it's not really trending towards this direction. Like of like, it's just going to replace what a human does. It's more like what your point about, like something comes in at midnight or 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. And the ROI is never going to make sense to have 24/7 support because you're paying just as much, if not more, for 1/100th of the conversations or activities. But you do have this thing that, knows everything there is to know about your operation and can give it a better response than not hearing from you. So it's like the inquiry comes in at 2 a.m. Like, would you rather, a 95% chance at an accurate answer right away? Or even for us, like we're seeing like 99.9% on inquiries, for example, where like if we have any doubt in the quality of the answer, it's just not going to respond. You know what I mean? So I guess the question isn't going to say the right thing or not the right thing. It's, well, what percentage of the time does it have the information it needs to actually make a difference?
Yeah,
You know what I mean? So but I
yeah,
think looking at it holistically, like for what it would cost to just have, I mean, it's not that you would have those people on staff per se, but to just have this as like kind of a bolt on your operation for a variety of reasons, messaging guests, generating new revenue, it's just going to be like a table stakes piece of the stack and you're seeing us, there's a handful of other tools, all with like .ai at the end, like kind of a rush towards building this like a really great product for people. So that's why I think it's actually like never been a better time to get into this space, because you have like on the high end, you have all these, hyperscaler companies investing hundreds of billions of dollars into AI, and then trickle down effects of all these startups looking at this and looking at different verticals like short-term rentals and saying, how can we build like a really kick-ass product for,
yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean, and I think it's really smart, right? Like it's just kind of looking at enterprise software. 20 years ago, you're building kind of very vertically specific solutions for leveraging the big investments that the hyperscalers are using, spending hundreds of billions of dollars on it, right? And yeah, so I actually want to ask you that. I'm kind of curious of some of the economics, but I wanted just before I leave the topic, what you're describing is basically like a co-pilot, right? Like a co-pilot to our existing staff, and that's the way that I framed it too. It's like, hey, this is here to help you, not to replace you. It's to give you like a smart assistant. You have a smart assistant next to you, and I think for us, it's and I feel like actually it's the right way. We're being more conservative so that we can continue to add on our kind of specific content to the AI, so it knows it gets a little more experience in kind of how we do things. But I do want to continue to unlock more and more capabilities, and I'm really excited about what this can become. I think that for anyone listening out there that has been thinking about implementing AI solution that already is in short term rentals, like you really are going to be left behind here. It's going to be basically like not having a PM in a year. It'll be basically like not having a PMS if you don't have a co-pilot that's like more tuned to your operations, because you're going to get like a 20-30% lift in efficiency. And if you're tracking the revenue metrics, it's going to be just like like to your point, table stakes. Like you're going to have
Yeah.
that and
Yeah.
learn how to use it. And the longer you wait, the bigger the competitive advantage that people like me and that are using it are going to have, versus people that that aren't going to
Yeah.
for some reason not use it.
Yeah. You kind of just like, it's like the expression where you don't have to, like, if you're getting chased by a bear, you have to outrun the bear. You just have to like outrun the slowest person behind. Like you don't like you like with this, like you
That's funny.
don't
I
have to
haven't.
pick. Oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I've heard that in that one, but I've heard the analogy, but I haven't used it in this way. It's really funny, actually.
Not in this context. Yeah. I mean, you don't my I guess to try to land it is like you don't have to bet that any one of these single kind of new players, whether it's us or some of the other AI vendors, are gonna like slam it out of the park. But you have to assume that based off of just the sheer billions of dollars going into it, that somebody's gonna emerge, and this is gonna be that sort of delivering on that sort of 10x promise that everybody thinks of.
Yeah.
Lots of iterations. And so you don't have to believe it's going to be me, you don't have to believe it's going to be us. But the reality, the cool thing about this is that there's so many things that kind of just feels like the missing piece. Like I'll give you a very like tactical example. Like one huge optimization problem we always get, and this is also whether you have one listing or like 1,000, is that like keeping track of when people actually leave your unit for when your cleaners arrive and when people are actually going to show up, because nobody like updates the arrival times or the departure times with the actuals. So we all get stuck with this sort of 11 to 4 trap where like I only have between 11 to 4. But if you had just an AI that was reading each conversation on either end of every reservation and saying, oh, that person that said, hey, we're out, like it's going to know that means they're gone. Or does it check with the lockbox, with the smart lock to say that they actually punched out at that time? What's going to happen is, just as like a very tactical example and something we're working on, is turning that standard like 11 to 4 window into a completely one-to-one dynamic window that will allow both for late checkouts and early check-ins, and work with your cleaners to make sure that you're like,
Amazing.
right now we're leaving money on the table. So that's not something that a human could consistently do or ever want to do at the same degree as like an AI that's constantly reading. So like there's a lot of, yeah, you know what I mean? There's a lot of things that like, as an operator, you're just going to get these big sort of like best practices that you can roll out on your properties that are all being done for you, versus having to like read blogs on what you need to be doing.
Yeah,
You know what
no,
I mean?
that's actually really cool. Actually, I hadn't thought about that. Now we have this. It's and I think that's the fresh perspective that people like you can bring, right? I think the 11 to 4, 10 to 3, whatever. It's kind of like now like gospel in short-term rentals.
Right.
Like that is the
Yeah.
cleaning window. And it's funny you say that. Like we actually have, so we have cameras in the properties we own. So we own 7 of them. The properties we own, we have cameras out there for all of them. And I basically gave my cleaners access to, I have one cleaner and she manages her team, but she has access to the cameras. And like, that was her biggest, she's like, that's the biggest thing. I love working with you guys because I have access to the cameras, that camera looking outside. So I know when the guests are leaving. So like, she'll pre-position her team to like be ready. And then when they see someone leave at 8 o'clock, like they can go in there and it can knock it out. And like for them, that's an extra 1 or 2 turns that they can do per day, and it's like it's a big deal for them. So there's all these downstream effects that we don't think about. That I mean, obviously not a big deal for her to just like look at her phone and look at the app and see when people are leaving, but all her staff can, the AI can just send a Slack to or send a message to someone saying, hey, the guest, oh, we looked at the camera, the guest left, or they punched out their code or a conversation, whatever the trigger event is, and send an event out and send a notification out. Those are like, it's actually really interesting. It's very nerdy, like very nerdy STR, but like that's a huge win. And if you run your own, actually, if you run your own cleaning staff, you're paying them hourly. Like, it's even bigger actually, because that's the biggest variable cost in short-term rentals is your cleaning. And if you can, it's priced in a certain way because they know they can only do like 2 cleanings per day. But if it's 3 cleanings per day, that's an extra 50% more efficiency on their side, and that can reflect in the cost and lower out the total cost for the operator and then maybe the guest too. So that's really cool, actually. Yeah, no, I hadn't thought about that. Sorry, I'm just kind of
Yeah, that's
thinking
going to
real
be like
time.
a pretty, yeah. I mean, you have to do the full. There's so many dependencies. There's like, okay, does the guest want the late checkout? Is the late checkout available? If it is, based off of, because that next guest said they're showing up at 7 p.m., does the manager has to sign off, and do they want to accept it? And then that has to go through and make sure the cleaner can do it. Then it goes back to the guest to pay for it, and you can't switch the lock zones until that until they've paid for it, until it's available for a 2 p.m. check-in, or you know what I mean? There's like a lot of variables that like just make it a problem that humans aren't really suitable to do. So it's like, that's one of the many
Yeah.
examples. You know what I mean? It's like of these really complicated optimization problems that at the end of the day, the simplest part about this is that we typically only have 30 days in the month. And like, whether it's a human or a robot, the goal is to maximize both like how many of those days can you get booked, and then within those reservations, like how can you squeeze the most amount of money out of
Yeah.
each.
Yeah, that's just a really interesting, kind of inverting the problem in a really cool way. Just because, like, it's just you're not gonna hire someone to do that because the ROI is too low, and like,
Yes.
candidly, that person that's smart enough to like deal with all these dependencies, like, you're really kind of wasting that person's talent by like having them check 7 different things to like squeeze out an extra clean, right? Like, that's actually where software is, it can be extremely helpful. Actually, I want to pivot the conversation just a little bit. Just actually talking about just the AI, like, we hear, maybe just like we can explain to us like our 5, right? I think a lot of people here are interested in AI and like want to know, and maybe this is their first real conversation about that. So what is the actual, like, what is the software that's driving all of this, right? Like, we hear this term like LLM, like we hear these different
Yeah.
models, like maybe just maybe like a minute, break it down for us a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So you can kind of think of these LLMs, like whether it's OpenAI or Google's Gemini or Facebook's Llama, like they're all just commodities. Like you can think of them as just like whether you go to Shell or BP or like whatever gas station, like you don't really think about it. You just know like the fuel. Like it really doesn't matter. Like all you have to know is that they've built these really impressive, really expensive AI brains, like reasoning engines. So we at Bestie, we just pick. So we've tested a lot of them, and let's just say we picked OpenAI as the starting one, right? So you just think of it as kind of like the fuel that runs the decision making, like a human would, and that's all you need to know about the LLM. What's more important is the actual practice of it. So that's when people talk about prompting, right? So we'll just take the example of like a guest question. So a question comes in about like the Wi-Fi. What Bestie is going to do is, it, as you've seen from your dashboard, it's built its own kind of knowledge base of everything that it knows about the listing. And so it's going to pull in the question, and then it's going to go into that knowledge base and say, what is everything I know about this keyword Wi-Fi, or something that's like mobile streaming? It knows that Wi-Fi and mobile streaming are similar, so it's going to pull that topic in. But before the AI can respond, it also needs to know the name of the guest. It needs to know the reservation details, like are they there yet? Have they gotten there? Is it halfway through their stay? Is it in the middle? It needs to know the time. So is it the morning or the night? Or how do I address this person? You know what I mean? What's the tone of the conversation? Are they upset? Are they happy? Like, should I use emojis? And basically, this prompt is what you can think of it as just a big bucket that goes into this brain to process. So like we give it all the information. We say, here's the question. Here's everything we know about the guest. Here's everything we know about the Wi-Fi. And now output the response. So all of that happens. So that's like a layer. All of that happens within about like 30 seconds. And then it comes out and then gives you that draft that your team can either approve and send or edit and then send. But that's kind of the whole meat and potatoes. And so you can get really in the weeds of how many layers you want to do to refine the language. So what if it is too nice? Do you want to apply a second engine that says, hey, look at this message, review it, make it less nice, make it more brief? Do you want to translate it at the end because the message came in French? So you need to apply a French translation. So it's basically just like you can think of them as these processing layers, just like a brain that inputs information and then outputs an answer. And then we're doing that within the context of guest messaging. That's kind of what it really boils down to.
Okay, got it. That makes sense. Like, let's talk about the economics a little bit, right? Besty AI charges a fee based on listings, right? I remember when we first when this was coming out, maybe like 6-8 months ago. It was very, very expensive, and now the technology has gotten cheaper and cheaper. But you see all this investment in AI, right? You kind of read these stats where it's like the cost for them to actually generate a response is actually like really, really expensive versus what the consumer is paying because it's all subsidized and whatnot. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, is this something sustainable? I think a lot of people kind of worry that like, we kind of learned this, but it's going to like the price is going to go up something crazy because it's all subsidized right now. Maybe talk a little bit about that. I think that's something that there's just a lot of confusion about.
Yeah, it's a great point. So I think of it as like Uber Eats and DoorDash that were like, or Uber themselves that were like subsidizing rides for forever, and then the fees are just like 3x because like all the dry powder from like VCs to subsidize to like clean up market shares is depleted. But that's actually not the case here. So like what's happening is the models are getting increasingly smarter. Like they're getting, just by performance metrics, like they're getting sent the bar exam and all these like SATs and all these like performance metrics of like exams and things to determine how much better the models are getting. And then at the same time, they're getting way more efficient. So like, I'll just give you an example. So we just moved from OpenAI, we using their like GPT-4 Turbo, like Premier, they're called Frontier models. And we just moved everything. When we talk about like a commodities, like we just moved everything off of that and moved on to Google's Gemini, and we're paying 6%. So if it was $1 per message on OpenAI, it's like 6 cents on Google. So it's like that was just, and that only took
like
us
a 20x change.
So literally 20 times cheaper, and it only took us about 2 months to like pivot our entire mechanism, everything we've done on OpenAI to move over. So just like it's getting increasingly, and so what that means is like, okay, wow, these guys are going to be really profitable. But no, there's like a lot more function calling and a lot more like AI prompts that we want to do to get the product to be better. And we can do that because like cost, it's not cost prohibitive. Whereas before, like it was cost prohibitive. We've been losing money pretty much the whole time, up until when we always knew the AI was going to get cheaper.
Yeah. I mean, is this like kind of, if we think the corollary back to the internet in the '90s, where you're probably too young to remember this. I don't know your age, but or you have a very good skin regimen. You look very young.
Yeah.
AOL, you had to pay for, by hour. This is back in the early '90s, and then you had to. It was very expensive. I remember, getting old, kind of ordering like as many CDs as you can get, so that you can like get the free membership, so you can, you can avoid paying for AOL. But like the bandwidth is so expensive back then, you can only download, an image, and it would take you like an hour or two. Is this kind of similar here? Do you think the cost curve goes down to, from $1 to 6 cents to
Yeah.
point zero zero whatever? Is that where you kind of see the industry headed?
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a cap on how much smarter it can get, from my view. Like basically, like these models, they're called like pre-trained models. Like they're pre-trained on like a ton of data that it's not really good at dealing with like novel information. It's just really good at like predicting the answer given what it knows about a certain topic. So those local max, like the constraint isn't going to be its cost. It's going to be sort of its intelligence. Like, and when I say a constraint, like there's differing views on this as far as how much smarter. Some people just think it's going to get infinitely smarter, and this is the tip of the iceberg. And then there's other people that are like some of the same researchers that invented some of these LLMs or were huge like contributors who were saying you guys have this completely wrong. Like there's like a lot of debate in the space right now about like, are we at the very start, it's going to get infinitely smarter, or are we at like the very kind of maximum? So, but either way, one thing that nobody's disputing is how much cheaper it's getting. So like they say like it's going to get so cheap that it makes financial sense for it to have it like check your calendar every day and be your personal assistant. Like the cost of intelligence is going to be rendered so low that like you're going to be, the cheaper it gets, the more you're going to be relying on it to do things. But yes, I think it's a completely safe bet to assume that we've just been at this a year and our costs have gone down 100 times since we
So
started.
so taking kind of the mobile internet as the example, where we had to pay like per, per data. Now everything's kind of, everything is effectively free. How long do you think it gets? And that was like 20-year journey, 25-year journey, depending on your, and we're maybe year 1 or 2 into this. How long do you think it takes for us to get there?
Yeah, I mean, it's the biggest like jump was to like seeing these models running locally on your phone, like meaning they don't need some like big storage base, so they don't need to like sit in some like Amazon warehouse as far as like large size. And like Meta's already got them rolled out on like WhatsApp and Instagram, and people are gonna like slowly start adopting it. And then Apple signed that deal for like having OpenAI integrated into Siri, which is going to be a really big deal. And so that's happening right now. I think it's already free, and it's going to just get, the capability is going to get higher and higher. But I think what's the big this next year, looking back a year from now, I'd imagine that like how much people are using actually using Siri and using it within the Apple products, and Google has the same AI stuff that they're rolling out. Like I think it's going to become we're going to start interacting with our phones a lot differently. Yeah.
Wow. What do you think the biggest risk to us as investors, right, as short-term rental investors with this technology? Do you think, and I'm just kind of riffing here, like, Airbnb has already kind of implemented AI, some good, some bad. They've implemented it from a discovery perspective, which is great because it's helping the searchers find what they want, right? But also there's been some negative for the guests, for the host and the guests, right? Where they're using AI to do a lot of their trust and safety functions, and it's just not. I don't think it's there at a point where it's that good where it catches all those edge cases. And it's great when a model is 99.9%. It's like great from an Airbnb perspective. But if you're that host at the 0.1%, like I'll give you an example here. There's this trending topic right now of an owner whose property in the mountains they've delisted, and they won't relist it because the AI is saying that it's unsafe, right? It's unsafe. Why? Because there's a guest that drove by and saw a bear nearby. This is the mountains, right? The bears just, they're there. And the AI is saying that, or the Airbnb is saying that, no, you have to build a fence around your property to keep them out, and then they're
Right.
like, bears climb fences really easily. Like, it's not going to keep out a freaking bear. But that owner is stuck right now. They can't relist their property, and they have a mortgage, they have whatever, right? So yeah, there are some drawbacks there. So I just shared that example because that's like a trending topic right now, for the last 2 days. These are some of the circles that I see. But I want to just kind of hear from you. Like, what do you think some of the biggest risks for us as investors, like with this technology?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would probably. I think that is kind of a double-edged sword, but I think that it's going to force a little bit of compression on management fees, because I think people that are running, and it's already existed from having offshore staffing and people moving offshore, being able to compete with like really really low management fees because they have some sort of advantage of scale. So I think it's two things. So on one end, I think like for the managers who have really sort of been at the cutting edge of automating as much as they can, both on like the OpEx, but just also in best practices to like squeeze every dollar out, or even to be a little bit more creative of their business model. Like I've talked to managers that, and maybe this is like the dirty secret, but like they don't pay any of their owners for any like early check-in, late checkouts that they do, and it's just on occupancy. So like on the occupancy stuff, they pay the full margin, but and so like I think that if you were to really zoom out over the next like 3 to 5 years, I think it will cause there will be more. People will be able to do so much more with less that they'll be willing
Interesting.
to sacrifice some of their management fees, I would say. And so it's not the AI that's going to go and compete with your management contract, but it's going to be the people that are using AI that are going to go and say, "Hey, I can do it for
Gotcha.
10% or 12% and still make a lot of money."
It's funny. It used to be, when we operated in the Smoky Mountains on the Tennessee side, we bought our first property there in September 2020. It was an owner that was having his property managed by a third party. And one of the kind of gentleman was in his 70s. They've owned the property for a while. I know they were like really optimizing on price. They're paying 40%. Like
Right,
that
right.
that was like market standard. That wasn't like egregious. I mean, it sounds really egregious now. For folks that are listening, 40%. So every dollar of revenue that this property manager was getting, they were keeping 40 cents of it, which is quite a bit. Market practice now is, 15 on the low end, like low end to 25. That's kind of like market. 20% is kind of market. But yeah, I think you're right. Like where if you can compress that down to the teens or the high single figure. Well, maybe not high. I mean, there is a low end. I think, like long-term rentals are probably 8%, 8 to 10%, depending on how big you are.
Yeah.
So it's probably like within that range. But that's an interesting perspective on just the cost compression. I think of it more as, there's a cost side, but also like the tooling, I hope will get cheaper. I think, there's this software bloat that we're all seeing. And I'm very, very mindful of it. You know, $10 a month here, $5 a month here, $8 a month here. That really adds up, right? In short-term rental, there's your PMS, which you have to have, and that averages, between $10 to $40 depending on your provider and how big you are. There's that, and then if you have, Price Labs, a couple bucks a month. You have Breezeway, you have, an access controls type software, you have guestbook software, you have, you can have like 10 pieces of software kind of running, and it gets very, very expensive because these are just, this is your fixed cost structure. So if you have something like your product, so I'm hopeful that, I would say disintermediate, but like can get smart enough to do all these things that need like a vertical solution. I feel like that would be a great add-on to, what the PMS provides. And candidly, even the PMSs, I've spoken with some people, they're worried, right? Because, you can replace them too,
Right.
actually, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
At a certain point, like that, you're like, besties of the world are the ones that can actually, as long as I can connect to all the OTAs, I don't really need them actually. If there's a simple channel manager that can, and I think maybe that's why, Guesty bought Rentals United, for example, because like that is actually a really easy way to disrupt this kind of duopoly we have right now with, and I know we're getting like really in the weeds now with
That's the
Hostaway and
interesting.
Guesty.
There's definitely like interesting dynamics. I mean, like our philosophy, and like I think why the same way you've never seen like any sort of point solution go that direction is because like you even like whisper those words and you'll get like instantly kicked off of all your distribution channels, and like that's why you're never going to see someone like Price Labs or anybody. Like even interesting that like the M&A within like what was interesting was like AirDNA buying, Uplisting as a PMS. Uplisting's like a really great partner, a PMS partner of ours, and like that was a point solution that's kind of more of like an intelligence layer buying an operation software, which seems like it's okay because people don't, it's not like combative. Like people that are an AirDNA customer using Besty aren't necessarily gonna like jump to uplisting as the PMS just because they're using AirDNA. So there's not, I don't see any huge conflicts there. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
Whereas
I
like,
have a different take actually.
oh really? Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
because like it's not like it's hooking. I mean, yeah, because like I would say that would be a really risky move if like just for one little PMS channel, AirDNA is going to risk all of these customers they have that are using all these major PMSs. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean that's so, and I won't name names because I mean, some of the stuff is just kind of like inside baseball. But there is an AI powered company that got kicked off of the aggregators, right? If you want to, the duopoly, because their product roadmap maybe felt threatening to some of these PMS systems, right? Because the PMS systems know, right, that this is probably the biggest, I think, strategic risk to them
Right.
is there's a really good piece of AI software that, and that's why they bought Reynolds United, because like the hard part is connecting to all the different APIs and dealing with all that nonsense. But if someone bought that and then they had the smart layer on top of that, they don't need the I think KKR just did a big round for, I think, the Series F or something for Guesty. So like, anyways, so then there's that, right? I think that's that piece. I think two is from an AirDNA perspective, also private equity owned, right? I think they needed to buy a PMS system because they needed, I think, one, they selling a point solution on how to analyze data. I think it's really hard. You can see by their pricing, they tried a different pricing structure. It didn't work. They had to revert back to a more monthly plan. And for them, how do you get real reoccurring revenue in this space? And it's not by, hey, look at my market data. Okay, I find a property, great, I buy it. Now I'm done.
Exactly.
I don't need
Yeah.
AirDNA, right? What they really need is the smart pricing, which is, they kind of go into the Price Labs world, right? And then you're seeing Hostaway just launch their smart pricing product, right? So everyone's kind of like getting into, the PMSs are all trying to lock in their customers by adding more point solutions. Like you can see Hostaway, they added an access control solution, right, to disintermediate remote lock, for example. You're seeing, so I mean, like these are just examples. You're seeing a lot of this happen in the space, and I think without kind of getting too far afield, I think this as investors, we have to just be mindful of like, I think one, cost, and two, the lock-in, right? Like I don't want to be forced to use Hostaway. I love the product, right? But there's something better. Like I want to be able to use it. Two, like I don't want to be locked out of great products, right? It actually worries me that I hear this software provider lose API access now, because it sets a precedent in industry. Like what if one day Hostaway is like, hey, we really want you to use our smart pricing product, and
Right.
they either charge, don't support, or charge the other people that plug into their API, and then
Real censorship. It's
yeah,
like
no,
you.
it really is, and I think most people aren't going to be like attuned to that. People
Yeah.
don't understand how APIs work, and so I feel like that's, for me, I think, is a big
Yeah, I
issue.
call it like it's like mutually, it's mutually assured destruction. It's like mutually assured satisfaction. Is that like if we can please enough of the any which PMS's customers in at scale, that we are kind of have the same, and we at the end of the day have the same goals as any of the big PMSs, that we want to delight the same customers. We share the same customers, and we use their rails to do it, but our goal is to make you happy as a customer. And so if we had 100 people using XYZ PMS and we just kind of got cut off, like we would be able, if you love our product, we'd go to you and say, hey, can you like bang on their door, let us back in? Or that's also going to cause them pressure to say, well, are people going to leave? Like we've had experiences where we've been like not allowed on a PMS because they see the feature set as too competitive. And so
Yeah.
every single person that knocks on us asking to integrate with that PMS after trying forever, we just said, look, it's never going to happen. We got that loud and clear. That's never going to happen. So here's an introduction, to one of the PMSs we can integrate with. And we see people just leaving that PMS every
Yeah,
day.
that's,
So
that's interesting.
anyways, Yeah.
No, no,
I mean,
it's a very, it's a very tricky for companies like you, right? And because it's like you can't be, if you're like too good, people love you too much. If your feature set's too big, and then you start, then the
right.
people that
For
control
sure.
your distribution start get worried about you. So there's a very interesting dynamic there.
I mean, they're the
Um,
boss. At the end of the day, they're the boss. Like, you got to keep them happy. We
but
got to stick the rules. It's the way
it's a
it is. I mean,
bad
for us, like,
it's a bad world
yeah,
it's a bad world for us to live in, though, because like they lock you in. They try to increase price like 20% a year because now they're private equity owned, and they, I love them, but like I don't love like hidden fees where they force you to use certain functionality, and then it's not clear, like you don't see it on your invoice that you're getting charged certain things. They tell you, but it's really hard to see. But anyways, I don't want to make this about that. I mean, I can probably talk already too long about this, but I think these are the things that, like, if you're in this space and kind of thinking about how to, kind of what the future holds, like the AI part is, I think, a really, really key piece. And,
yeah,
you know, Sam, I want to thank you for educating me and educating all of us on, and how to use your product and how to best navigate this
yeah. No, I think
emerging
just
landscape.
depending, 100%. I think, like, in closing, like, you just have sort of like, whether you're one or two properties or whatever, like, we're starting to scale to larger. Like, you can kind of bank on the fact that one of these, like, sort of emerging vendors or a handful of them are going to figure it out, and, like, through enough iterations. And we're kind of in, like, year one now, that we're, like, coming up on our, like, literally our 1 year anniversary with, like, two or three people on the team, now scaling up to like 25 people on the team. Like, what are going to be the downstream effects of that to the product? It's going to, obviously, we've made it this far with a few people. It's going to get, can you expect it to get 2 to 5 times better? Like, for sure. You know what I mean? So people got to look forward to that, not even just for us, but for how much money they can make as an investor. Because at the end of the day, you get into this because you are promised, that, like, there's better returns than if you were to just have a long-term tenant. And I've switched between short-term and long-term tenants before for that very reason, and the juice has to be worth the squeeze. So I think that it's only going to be because of tools like that. Not only, but a huge factor is going to be able, like, to rely on things that are running on autopilot to make you that extra income, to make it worthwhile.
Agreed.
And it's hard to get that right now without incurring additional costs through people. So
Yeah, no, I think everyone should. I think it's a must. It's a strategic must. Like, you got it. You need a co-pilot to whatever software solution that you're running. And I'm glad to hear that you're kind of, you don't have to use a PMS to access your software. I think that's something really, really powerful. There's, probably 80% of the market that isn't on a PMS, that just one or two listings on the Airbnb app, and if you're able to integrate there, I think it's super helpful. And like, for folks out there that are thinking about this, I highly, we use it. We're road testing it out. We've gotten good results. I definitely highly encourage everyone to at least research Bestie, the other competitors that do similar functions, and like find something that you like and that you can use and test it out, because I think you're going to find that it's really, really efficient. It's going to really kind of drive those efficiency gains. And to Sam's point, like, you don't have to outrun the AI bear, but you just got to outrun the guy or the gal that isn't using it. I love that.
yeah.
It's really funny. Hey Sam, so what's the best way to learn more about Bestie?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you can reach out directly on our website. It's besty.nyc or besty.cc. Those are two easy to remember. I think it's not Betsy. A lot of people mix up. I think it's like an autocorrect. I think it's BETSY, Betsy, but it's Besty. So you can find us, just go on our website, and we have a little human chatbot that you can talk to if you have questions. It's not an AI, it's us.
Is
It'll
that you?
Yeah, it's literally me. It'll come to my phone. Chances are it's going to be me responding to you if you have questions. And then we have a team that can do demos and that kind of thing. But uh, open to any questions. If you don't see a PMS we integrate with, you can reach out. We'll build it. And we're just really looking to, meet more operators building in the space. Or you can reach me on LinkedIn as well. It's Sam Dundas.
Perfect. And Sam, for folks that are, listening to this and interested, are software investors, or like, building a similar cool product. Yeah. Like, is LinkedIn the best place to reach out to you?
Yeah. Just via email, sam@getbestie.ai or sam@bestie.cc. Any of those, you can just shoot me an email directly.
Perfect. Well, look, we'll have the Bestie's website and Sam's information on the show notes. So I'll definitely reach out. And again, highly encourage everyone to research and implement. These are pretty lightweight solutions. It doesn't require a ton of implementation. It literally is like 5 minutes you can get set up. Getting set up is the easy part. Like actually implementing, using it, that takes more time. So like start small. Like you'll see some of the efficiency gains, and I believe it will be a very worthwhile investment in time and effort. So Sam, thanks again for coming on. I know we went way over, but this has been a super enjoyable conversation, and
Yeah,
thank you, and appreciate all your help in helping my business become more efficient.
no doubt. I'm excited to see where we're at this time next year. If you're still finding the value, and hopefully we can do that for you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sam. Have a great rest of the day.
Bye bye.